Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My topic is about the history of classification in chapter 3. So I will explain about, let me first select highlighter. Okay, so I will explain about history of classification systems. The earliest known system of classification of organisms, it goes back to Aristotle era. Aristotle, he was Greek philosopher, and he had classified plants into one group and other organisms related to the animals, they were into another group. So basically he had classified organisms into two major groups. Another example that is given in your book is about Abu Usman Umar al-Jahiz, and in 700 AD he had characterized 300 species of animals, and he had specially worked on the life of ants. Some of the biologists' contribution is mentioned in the book. That one of them was Andrea Cisalpino in 1519 to 1603. He had divided plants into 15 groups and he had called them genera. So as we have studied earlier in the hierarchical system of classification, that we have the phylum, and then division, class, order, family, genus, species. So the genus, it contains several numbers of the species, and when it is plural we will use the word genera. Okay, there was another scientist or biologist, his name was John Ray, and his time period, he was born in 1627 and he passed away in 1705. He published important work on plants classification. Then Augustus Rivinus in 1652 to 1723, he introduced the term which is nowadays used as an order. So any organism which we studied, that in plants if we have ALES at the end, it will be an order, like Asterales. So Tournefort in 1656 to 1708, he introduced two more terms, class and the species. Then the modern classification system was established by Carolus Linnaeus, and he is considered as father of taxonomy. He was born in 1703 and passed away in 1778. He grouped species in 1753 according to similar physical characters, and he had introduced binomial nomenclature system. Now what is binomial nomenclature system? Binomial, bi means two and nomial means name, and nomenclature means to assign the name. So he was the one who assigned two names to the plant, to a species. For example, for human, he assigned two names, Homo, sapiens. Homo is the genus and sapiens is the species. So this was this contribution goes to Linnaeus, that he had introduced the binomial nomenclature. Okay, Carolus Linnaeus had classified organisms into three kingdoms. First of the kingdom was kingdom minerals, second was kingdom vegetable, and third one was kingdom animal. And he had classified the plants according to their ranks. The major rank was class, and in the class there were several orders, and in the order rank there were several families, and in the families there were several genera, and inside the genera several species were classified. So this was his system of classification. For the long time the two kingdom system classification has been used, and in two kingdom system of classification there were two major kingdoms: kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia. Those organisms which had the characteristic of autotrophic nature. So these organisms, they were classified under Plantae. What is the meaning of autotroph? Autotroph means that these organisms, they can manufacture their own food from simple inorganic material. This is, sorry, not organic, it is inorganic. In the book it is written as organic, but it is inorganic. What does it mean? It means that what are the inorganic compounds? The inorganic compounds are carbon dioxide and water. So the autotrophs, it means that plants, they manufacture food from just simple carbon dioxide and water, and they manufacture the glucose molecule, which is the building block of the life. So C6H12O6, all the carbohydrates, cellulose, or all the complex organic molecules, they are made up of this simple glucose molecule, and oxygen is released. So only the plants, they have this ability that they can manufacture the food just only from carbon dioxide and water. While Animalia, these are all the organisms which could not manufacture their own food, and these were heterotrophs, like the human being, like the animals. The animals, they cannot manufacture their own food. So what do? They live on plants. So they live on plants directly, or they live on plants indirectly. Directly, how do they live? Like for example, human being and the sheep or goat or cows. So what do? They eat plants. But the animals, some animals, they do not eat plants, they do not eat leaves. So what do they eat? They eat other animals. So for example, the lion, what does lion eat? Lion generally eats deer. So now the lion is eating the deer, but what the deer is eating? The deer is eating plants. So this is the indirect dependency of lion over the plants. So these organisms, they cannot manufacture their own food, and they were grouped as heterotrophs under Animalia kingdom. Okay, after two kingdom system, they had some drawbacks. So what were these drawbacks? Drawbacks were that there were several unicellular organisms. Example is given in the book is Euglena. So they had dual nature. They had both characteristics of plants and they have the characteristics of animals. So what were the characteristics which were similar to the plants? They had chlorophyll contents, so they could manufacture their own food. And what were the animal like characters in them? So they were heterotrophic in nature, they could not manufacture their own food, but also they had an absence of the cell wall. So this is the main characteristic of animals, that in animals there is no cell wall. In plants there will be cell wall, and cell wall in plants is made up of cellulose. So Euglena was one of the examples from several unicellular organisms that they had both the plant-like characters and animal-like characters. So this was one of the objections by different biologists, that what we will do with these kind of organisms, so where we should put them. And the second point was ignored during the two kingdom classification system, was that some plants, they are prokaryotes, some organisms they are prokaryotes, and some organisms they are eukaryotes. Now what does prokaryote and eukaryote means? So prokaryotes are those organisms in which there is no true nucleus. True nucleus is absent. What does it mean? It means that they do not have the nucleus, they do not have the nuclear membrane. Some region will be there where DNA and RNA, DNA or RNA will stay there in prokaryotic cells. So this is one difference. While in eukaryotic cells, the DNA or RNA is enclosed inside the nucleus, and there is the proper nucleus, and the nucleus has nuclear membrane. So what was the other difference? The other difference was that in prokaryotic cells, they do not have membrane bound organelles. What does it mean, membrane bound organelles? Membrane bound and organelles. So first I will explain organelles. Organelles are inside the cell. There are some different types of the parts are present which are responsible for different functions. Like in plants, one of the organelles is chloroplast, and this chloroplast has membrane around it. So this chloroplast, what is its function? Its function is photosynthesis. It absorbs sunlight and do photosynthesis. There is also another organelle, that is the mitochondria. What is the function of mitochondria? It synthesizes ATP, and it also has two membranes. It has double membrane. What is the other organelle? For example, there is ribosome, and ribosome has also the membrane around it. So what is the function of ribosomes? It has the function of protein synthesis. Now, all these organelles, any organelle which has the membrane, they will be absent in prokaryotic cells. But any organelle which has a membrane, they will be present in eukaryotic cells. Though keep it in mind that the chloroplast is present only in plants, photosynthetic organisms, not in animals. So these were the two differences. So the plants and the Plantae and Animalia, they had some prokaryotes and eukaryotes, but it was not clear. They were just mixed together there when they were classified. So then the third system, the three kingdom system, was classified by Ernest Haeckel, and the Ernest Haeckel had the same objection, that where we should put Euglena like organisms. So the first two kingdoms, they were considered as it is, but the third additional kingdom was established, that was given the name Protista, and in Protista Euglena and bacteria were classified, but fungi was still inside the Plantae. Now one of the problems was solved, that there are some organisms, they have the dual nature, they act like plants and they have some characters from the animals also. So these organisms were separated, but if we see the second point in the drawback of the second one, prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and this point was ignored. Fungi is still there in the Plantae. Bacteria is classified with Euglena. So there were drawbacks of this system also. Later on, the biologists, they raised objection on this system. So what was the objection? They raised this objection that there is no clear difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes when the plants and animals and the protists, they are classified. And also they had objection about the position of the fungi. They said that the fungi cannot be classified in the Plantae, though the fungi, they resemble plants, but at the same time they are not autotrophs. When they are not autotrophs, in that case these organisms, any species which is under fungi, these organisms they cannot be kept under the kingdom Plantae. The second objection was that these are heterotrophs, the fungi, these are heterotrophs, these are not autotrophs, so these are heterotrophs, and they can get their food through absorption. So they break down the organic substances, they break down, they work on the organic substances either on plants, either on animals, or inside the plants, inside the animals. They break down these organic complex substances into simple substances, and then when all these complex substances, they are converted into simple substances, then the fungi, they use them for their as their food. And third point, the cell was the cell wall, that in fungi the cell wall is made up of chitin, but in plants it was placed under the plant. So another objection was that the plant's cell wall is made up of cellulose, but the cell wall of fungi is made up of chitin. So how we can group the fungi under the kingdom Plantae? So this was their third objection about the position of fungi. So the two major points were there. Differences between prokaryotes and eukaryotes was not clear. Second, the position of fungi in the kingdom Plantae was also questionable based on these three points, that fungi, these are not autotrophs, these are heterotrophs, and their cell wall is not made up of cellulose, but the cell wall is made up of chitin. Later on, in 1967, Robert Whittaker, he proposed and introduced the modification of three kingdom classification into five kingdom classification. So please remember that it was Robert Whittaker, 1967. In the textbook under this five kingdom classification, Echeton name is also mentioned, and who had suggested some terms. But remember, Echeton did not give this five kingdom classification. It was in fact Robert Whittaker, 1967. What was the contribution of Echeton? Echeton contribution is that they described bacteria under the term prokaryotic, and they described animals and plants under the term eukaryotic. So when Robert Whittaker introduced and established this five kingdom classification, so what was his basis? His basis was about the 2 points. One was the level of cellular organization. Now what does this cellular organization mean? Cellular organization means the cellular structure and all the organelles present inside the cell. For example, the prokaryotic cells, they do not have true nucleus, and eukaryotic cell, they have true nucleus. So the other difference I have already explained. So this is the cellular organization. So he classified prokaryotes and eukaryotic cells. The eukaryotic cells were further divided into unicellular eukaryotic cells and multicellular eukaryotic cell. Another main point which was considered for classification was mode of nutrition. One of the mode of nutrition was autotrophic organisms. It means that they could do photosynthesis. What does the photosynthesis means? Photosynthesis occurs in those organisms, especially in plants, where the leaves are present. Inside the leaves there are chloroplasts. Inside the chloroplasts there are chlorophyll molecules. So the chlorophyll molecules, they absorb sunlight and they convert simple carbon dioxide and water into glucose molecule, and they release oxygen. So this is photosynthesis. The other organisms, they are not autotrophs, they are heterotrophs, but they absorb food material by digesting it into simple substances. So these are the fungi. And then human and animals, they are also heterotrophs. They live on other organisms, they depend on other organisms, but they ingest the food, and during ingestion inside their bodies they have the specialized cavities where the food is digested. So these 2 points were considered. These two are the basis of five kingdom classification: level of cellular organization and principal mode of nutrition. Okay, so what was the Robert Whittaker classification system, five kingdom classification system? If we see here, Protista was the same, and Plantae and Animalia, they were considered from the previous three kingdom classification. What was the addition or modification of the classification? They had separated organisms and they classified them as Monera, in kingdom Monera, and they separated all the fungi species from the from the plantae and assigned them a separate kingdom as kingdom fungi. So Monera, what is the Monera? Monera are generally all prokaryotes are in Monera. Prokaryotes. These are unicellular. So prokaryotes are there. These are unicellular. And Protista, fungi, plantae and animalia, all of them, these are eukaryotic organisms. So in these eukaryotic organisms, the Protista, these are either unicellular or simple multicellular organisms. Uni or multicellular organisms. While in case of the fungi, in case of plantae, in case of animalia, all of these are multicellular organisms. Multicellular organisms. So this is the major difference between Monera, Protista, fungi, plantae and animalia. Monera are prokaryotic unicellular organisms. Protista are eukaryotic unicellular and multicellular organisms. Fungi, these are eukaryotic and multicellular organisms. Plantae, eukaryotic multicellular organisms. Animalia, eukaryotic and multicellular organisms. Later on, some modification was done. Sometimes the examiner, they can change the question. They will not ask about the 5 kingdom classification system. They will not ask about the basis of the modification, basis of the 5 kingdom classification. They can ask what was the modification in this classification system. So in fact, in 1988, Margalis and Schwartz, these were two biologists. They included the genetic study of organisms into the classification system, and based on their genetic studies, the plants, the animals, the microorganisms, all of them, they were classified. Okay, the other 2 points, they were from the previous system of classification. It means that cellular organization and mode of nutrition were taken from the Whittaker's 5 kingdom classification. Only 1 point was added, that genetic characters were considered. What does genetic character mean here now? We can take an example of the pea plant. In pea plants, the pea plants, they will have capital T and capital T. These are tall plants, or they will be short plants. So we will come back to this one in the genetics chapter. So these are the 2 major characters, genetic characters which are present. Some plants are tall, some plants are short, and this is because of their inheritance from which they are taking from their parent. So this is the genetics. Or if we see in human, the simple character is in about a human. So how many blood groups are there in human? There are 4 blood groups: A blood group, B blood group, AB blood group and O blood group. And all of these blood groups, in different persons, there will be different blood groups. So these are inherited characters and they are transferred from their parents. So this is considered as the genetic character. So 3 major points were considered for classification. So this was the modification of 5 kingdom: study of genetics, level of cellular organizations and modes of nutrition. The last 2, they were same as these were explained by Whittaker, but only the genetics was also considered as the basis for the classification. So rest of the classification was same. They had only the 5 kingdom was there, so as it was proposed by Whittaker. So now, before we had explained, there is Monera, there is Protista. So what is the third one? Third one is fungi. The fourth one is plants, and the fifth one is animalia. So we will study general characteristics of these 5 kingdoms. For the kingdom Monera, I have already explained that these are prokaryotic organisms, and these are unicellular, though they live in chains. It is unicellular, but they will make the chain-like structure, or they will make in a group, they will live in a clusters. or sometimes they live in colonies. They are unicellular, but when they are colonies, it looks like they are the multicellular, but these are living in colonies like bacteria. So some of the organisms, they are autotrophs, but most of these organisms, they are heterotrophic in nature. So autotrophs means they do photosynthesis, and where they do photosynthesis, they perform photosynthetic reaction inside the chlorophyll molecule. So that's why these are autotrophs, because they can manufacture their own food. So what are the examples? Bacteria and cyanobacteria are the two examples of kingdom Monera. Kingdom Protista, these are eukaryotic organisms, unicellular organisms, or they are also sometimes multicellular, but they are simple multicellular organisms. Now, what does this simple multicellular organism mean? They are multicellular but simple. What is the simple mean? That their body will be multicellular, but the sex organs, they will be unicellular, they will not be multicellular. So there are three types: algae, protozoa, and fungi like protists. So algae, what are algae? Now what is an algae? First question is, what is an algae? Algae are the plants which do not have roots, stem, or the leaves. So I can give an example of the algae. Sometimes if we go to any place where there will be just a little water on the floor, or there will be moisture, so we can observe that after some time, when this water remains for the longer time, what happens? Sometimes some green color layer appears on the floors, right? Especially on in the toilets also. So green color layers, they appear. So these green color layers are actually algae. These algae, these are unicellular. They are unicellular, but they live in colonies in some of the examples, like volvox. It will come later on in the 3rd or 4th chapter somewhere. Or some are the simple multicellular. What are their similarities with the plants? They have the cell wall, and the cell wall is made up of cellulose material, and they do photosynthesis because chlorophylls are present in the chloroplasts in these cells. So what does it they are simple multicellular now. So what is the meaning of it? The simple multicellular can be explained as that they do not have multicellular sex organs, and they do not form embryos during life cycles. So there was another type of the kingdom Protista, that was protozoans. They resemble animals, they lack chlorophylls, and they do not have cell wall. So all the animals, they do not have cell wall. Cell wall is the characteristic of the plants only, and chlorophylls, they are in the plants and some other organisms like cyanobacteria. The third type of the protists was the protists, but they look like fungi. So these organisms, they were separated into another type under the kingdom Protista. Okay, then some characteristics of kingdom fungi are, I have already explained that these are eukaryotic organisms, they are multicellular, and they are heterotrophs. So what is the meaning of heterotrophs? Heterotrophs means they cannot manufacture their own food, but what do? They break down the substances into the organic complex substances into simple one. How they break down? In fact, these fungal strains, they secrete some digestive enzymes, and these enzymes actually break down these complex organic molecules into simple substances. So then these fungal strains, they will be able to absorb these nutritions. So example is mushroom, and some other examples are like the fungal diseases present in the plants, or inside the plant, or inside the animal, or on the skin of the animal and human, or inside the human. And also one of the examples is penicillium. Penicillium, where does it grow? If we observe the rotten oranges, citrus fruits, so sometimes we will see they will have some green layer on it. So this green layer is actually fungal strain. Or sometimes if we see bread, inside the bread, if we just moisten some bread and leave it outside for some time, what will happen? Some black spots, they will appear on the bread. So this is known as bread mold. It is also a fungus. So these fungi, these are decomposers also. They live on organic material. They secrete digestive enzymes. When they secrete digestive enzymes, they break down the complex organic molecules into simple substances. And finally, they absorb these molecules. So this is about the kingdom fungi. Then we have another kingdom, that is kingdom plantae. Kingdom plantae, these are eukaryotic, these are multicellular. So all the plants, whatever we see outside, all these plants, they come under, they are classified under kingdom plantae, and they are multicellular. They are autotrophs. What does autotroph mean? They can manufacture their own food through photosynthesis, and they have multicellular 6 organs, which are actually sperm and egg, and finally they form embryo. So when embryo will be there, it means the seed is there. So inside the seed there is always an embryo, and when we cultivate this seed, a new plant will grow. So examples are mosses, ferns, flowering plants. Those plants, they produce flowers, and non-flowering plants, those plants, they are not able to produce flowers, but they produce the hard cones. So the non-flowering plants are gymnosperms. So somewhere in biology we will study that one also. Kingdom Animalia. These are eukaryotic organisms. Yeah, one more point. Plants, they cannot move from one place to another place. Okay, so what is the reason they cannot move? Because the plants, they have the roots, and because of the roots, these plants, they are anchored inside the soil. So the plants cannot move from one place to the other place. While kingdom Animalia are those organisms, they are able to move from one place to another place because of their legs and because of their movement for the food from one place to other place. These are eukaryotic organisms. These are multicellular. These are known as consumers. What does consumer mean here? Consumer means they consume food. They cannot manufacture their own food, but they take food from other organisms, from the plants, from the animals. But plants, they are considered as producers. What does producer mean? That they can make their own food. They produce their own food. They are not depending on any other organism, while animals are depending on other organisms. And they are the organisms which are under kingdom Animalia, they digest the food within their specialized cavities. So this is one of their characteristics or properties. And the kingdom Animalia, they do not have cell wall. While plantae, they had a cell wall. Cell wall was made up of cellulose in the plants, and in fungi, the cell wall was made up of chitin. In animal, they only have the cell membrane. So here we go. Now this system is all these characteristics, they are tabulated here, and 5 characters are given. On the basis of these 5 characters, all these 5 kingdoms, they are differentiated. So on the basis of cell type, on the basis of nuclear membrane, cell wall, mode of nutrition, unicellular or multicellular organisms. So kingdom Monera, the cell type is prokaryotic and nuclear membrane is absent in them. The cell wall is made up of non-cellulose material. They have some polysaccharide materials, but some amino acids are also present in it. While the cell wall of the plants, it is made up of cellulose. Cell wall of fungi, it is made up of chitin. Mode of nutrition, they are autotrophs also, or they are heterotrophs also. And most of their organisms, these are unicellular. Protista. The cell type is eukaryotic cell. Nuclear membrane is present. Cell wall is present. and they may be autotrophs or heterotrophs, or in some organisms both the characteristics are present as autotrophic and heterotrophic characteristics. And most of the cases these are unicellular. So multicellular are present in few cases. Fungi, these are eukaryotic organisms. Nuclear membrane is present in them. Cell wall is made up of chitin. They are absorptive in nature and they are heterotrophs. They cannot manufacture their own food. So they are multicellular in nature. Present means that multicellular characteristic is present in them. In Plantae, they are eukaryotic. Nuclear membrane is present. Cell wall is made up of cellulose. They are autotrophs and they are multicellular. Animalia, all the characters are same, eukaryotic, present, but they do not have cell wall there. And they are not autotrophs, but they are heterotrophs, but by ingestion they can digest the food inside their specialized cavities, and they are multicellular. So multicellular character is present in them. Now, how the biologists, they predict that these all the rest of the 4 kingdoms, they are evolved from Monera. So this diagram shows about the evolution of 5 kingdoms. From the Monera, the protists were evolved, and from the protists, the more complex and advanced organisms like plants, like fungi and animalia, they were evolved. So, thank you very much.